Hello and welcome to live programming here at the More Freedom Foundation. If you could let me know in the comments whether I'm coming through okay, that would be good to know. So, what is happening? Well, Israel has attacked Iran, and it turns out that it is significantly more damaging, significantly higher yield than was promised or was suggested. The idea was that Israel was going to attack Iran's nuclear program. That has not happened yet. What they have opted for is a full attempt to decapitate the Iranian regime, to destroy it entirely. And not much is clear. A few things are very clear at this point, and we're going to talk about those things that are very clear. The broader question of is Iran going to retaliate is extraordinarily an open question at this moment. It is not a closed question at this moment, but it is. There's been shockingly little Iranian retaliation so far. We won't know, I suppose, until night falls. These drone and missile attacks are often more effective in the evening, and I think we've still got an hour or two before it is dark again in the Middle East. But it does seem likely, it seems very possible at this point, that Iran has been caught completely with its pants down and was successfully lulled into a false sense of security by actions and declarations of the Trump administration. And it really looks very heavily like Iran is just getting its ass kicked right now. We'll talk a little bit more about whether that's true and what possible scenarios we have upcoming in a bit. The first thing I want to say is that there was no urgency here. There was no necessity here. This was not a preemptive strike by Israel. This was not justified by anything. This was not. This is a long-standing goal of the Israeli government to attempt to overthrow the government of Iran and to draw the United States into a war to do that. And they have carried it out against the will of the American people for sure, but not really against the will of the American political system. There was no reason to do this now with this urgency other than to save the military-industrial complex's favorite prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, whose coalition was looking pretty shaky. That has been done, I think effectively done. This is because, much like the United States in the aftermath of 9/11, Israel has been driven and has driven itself, has been encouraged to drive by its government itself into a homicidal, genocidal frenzy. And now that Israel is very much attempting to destroy a country of 80 million people, he has, regained legitimacy, and his coalition that was looking very shaky 48 hours ago is now completely solidified. This is, of course, exactly what U.S. defense interests want, because Benjamin Netanyahu does not serve Israel. He serves U.S. weapons companies. We actually saw this quite explicitly in the past week. It's usually not this open, but subtlety is not something that the Trump administration does. We had Mike Huckabee, the really laughably disgusting U.S. ambassador to Israel, or is he the Israeli ambassador to the United States, who was actively working in Israeli politics to shore up Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition. I would maintain that Benjamin Netanyahu has been in charge of Israel for as long as he has been because of U.S. defense interests, certainly not Israeli interests. But it was rarely as explicit, that shoring up was rarely as explicit as it was over this past week. And now I think Netanyahu has pulled it off. I don't think anybody doubts that Netanyahu will be in charge of Israel for another 6 months to a year-long period, no matter what happens here. Whether this is the stunning victory over Iran that many appear to be perhaps prematurely suggesting, or if it becomes into develops into a long drawn out catastrophic war for all parties, that also shores up Netanyahu. So really mission accomplished. Raytheon's Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will survive and will last. Yeah. Yeah. That's something that's going on. Sorry to hear the video is lagging a bit, but that appears to be what happens here with my system. I will look into that. Another thing we know, this was not about nukes. This was a decapitation strike. This is an attempt at regime change war. This is entirely supported by the United States. There was a lot of, last night, there were a lot of sort of MAGA conservative anti-war people who are like, what's really happening here? How could Netanyahu do this against Trump's, orders, yada, yada, yada. What happened to the peace president? I know the peace president I voted for wouldn't have let this happen. And Donald Trump has completely squashed that over the course of this morning with a series of posts talking about how he knew ahead of time that this was happening. This was part of his strategy all along. He wholeheartedly supports this new attempt at a regime change war. That's what's happening. That's what the United States is doing. That's what Israel is doing. We are attempting to launch a new $1 trillion war. It is interesting, as often appears to be the case at the beginning of these things. It looks like it might actually be easier than we thought, and maybe it's just going to be a few tens of billions of dollars to decapitate the Iranian regime and probably create another horrifically large refugee crisis for the region. But that's how things often look with these things in the first days, weeks, or months. So we'll see. What now? I guess is sort of the important question. It really does seem, and folks have been shocked by how little retaliation we've seen from Iran at this point. The expectation was, I think, quite possibly among the Israelis as well, because their secondary goal here, beyond preserving Raytheon's Israeli prime minister, is providing cover for their continued genocide. I'm not certain whether or not the internet has been restored in Gaza, but Israel has finally taken the step of simply shutting off the internet so we can't see what they're doing there. So a ancillary goal here is facilitating Israel's final solution to the Gaza problem, which we had seen escalating in horror in recent weeks. That is, so in order to facilitate that, Iran needs to actually fight back, frankly. And because at this point, it's looking entirely one-sided. The attacks against Iran were massive last night. Took out, seeing figures like 20 highly ranked Iranian generals have been taken out. I believe that's including, most of the upper ranks of most of their IGRC forces, the folks in charge of the missiles, the Air Force, the Navy, this, that, and the other thing. The actual missile facilities have been targeted. Civilian neighborhoods have been targeted. I saw at least one apartment complex knocked over. This is a massive, massive attack, and it is continuing. It is an ongoing massive attack against Iran, and we have seen very little Iranian reprisal. There was some, I don't know if this is OSINT garbage from Twitter, but there was some indication that they had perhaps launched like 100 drones, all of which were shot down. Brett McGurk, a particularly loathsome creature from the Biden administration, is on CNN bragging that all of the people who would be organizing the counterattack have been killed. This is an attempt to wipe out the Iranian regime. I'm not certain. It seems as if the supreme leader and the president perhaps have not been attacked in this manner yet. but that remains a possibility. Once upon a time, it was illegal under U.S. law. It may still be illegal under U.S. law to block any kind of assassination of foreign leaders. That is obviously, among many, many, many other things, is a little piece of basic decency that has been long discarded by the United States because of the war on terror. Because of 9/11, that thing that we inflicted upon ourselves through Saudi Arabia. It's all rather grim and depressing. But what now? I think that's the important question. Is Iran legitimately as destroyed as it looks at this moment? Are they not going to be able to launch a single missile at Israel? I think Israel would be kind of disappointed by that, because that's less cover for the genocide than they were hoping. But that seems like a real possibility at this hour. However, it is also possible that we're going to fall into a pretty horrific series of tit-for-tat retaliations. Sorry, I shouldn't use that tit-for-tat terminology. Like, this is a war. Like, Israel has started the war with Iran. What is interesting and is becoming clearer to me is the sort of weird constraints. This is that rare thing in sort of U.S. foreign policy. Iran has been painted into a pretty bleak corner here. Their options are really, really limited. It was easier when Saudi Arabia was aligned against them. Now that they have a sort of rapprochement with Saudi Arabia endorsed by China, it's harder for them to lash out at softer targets. It does appear that something that I doubted, and those doubts could be confirmed, this time tomorrow, or really in a couple hours before. I mean, who knows? Before we finish this presentation, but it does seem as if the Iranian missile capacity, the vaunted Iranian missile capacity, is in fact vastly degraded, and in fact may not have actually ever been that impressive. This leads to another kind of interesting thing, is what was the axis of resistance? Because it is absolutely something that should be talked about in past tense. The Shia Crescent, this formidable, horrible threat to Israel and the United States somehow, even though they'd never really threatened us. That also, much like the Soviet Union, came about because of U.S. actions. Because the United States, with World War I, set the conditions for Hitler, and then the defeating of Hitler required allowing the Soviet Union to build a little empire in Eastern Europe. The United States created the conditions for the Islamic State, and defeating the Islamic State led to the strengthening of this axis of resistance, this sort of little mini Iranian empire that is now gone, just gone. Assad is gone. Hezbollah still exists as an organization, but is largely toothless. And that gets to the lack of urgency here. Like, there was no need to do this other than to keep Netanyahu in power. Iran had already been chastened and defeated, and it now seems that, everybody from Jared Kushner to Joe Biden is getting what they wanted, which is a regime change war against Iran, a country that was already largely defeated and presented no threat to Israel or the United States. We are doing a $1 trillion war and risking another million dead, mostly for funsies, mostly so people in the U.S. military-industrial complex can make money and get their rocks off. It does prompt the question, is like, what was the axis of resistance ever? Was the axis of resistance just kind of it kind of looks almost like it's just a ploy to help Israel do genocide, because it never actually presented a real threat to Israel, certainly never presented any kind of threat to the United States, and now looks entirely demolished. Who knows? As I said, 2 hours from now, perhaps, Israel, perhaps Iran figures out how to open the missile bay doors and unleashes hell on Tel Aviv and U.S. soldiers across the region. But that is not what it looks like right now. Right now, it looks a lot like October of 2024, when Israel successfully decapitated, the Hezbollah movement in Lebanon, killed Hassan Nasrallah, a sort of icon of resistance, and everybody was like, "Oh wow, now the gloves are off. Hezbollah's really gonna show Israel what for," and that sure never happened. The weird thing is that because of the Gulf monarchs' outreach to Iran over the past number of years, Iran is constrained. The soft underbelly of the U.S.-Israeli anti-Iran coalition was the Gulf, and that was also the soft underbelly of the entire world, which was that if U.S. and Israel used superiority with weapons or whatnot to try to attack Iran, Iran could hold the whole world hostage through the use of the oil weapon. And that would mean, destroying, either just blockading the Strait of Hormuz, which is rather difficult, or much more easily, as was demonstrated in 2019, simply destroying Gulf oil capacity. No matter how much Texas shale there is, somewhere between 30 and 35% of U.S. world oil production. Very little of U.S. Oil consumption, but world oil production goes through the Persian Gulf. So that oil weapon that Iran always had has been largely diffused. Saudi Arabia came out and gave a furious condemnation this morning of Israel's unwarranted aggression against Iran, whereas 5 years ago, 10 years ago, Saudi Arabia would have been all for it. The easy response for Iran that Saudi Arabia used to offer them has to some extent been taken off the table. I think it's a very interesting question whether, if Iran lacks the capacity to attack Israel directly and also still is being lulled somehow, fooled by Trump into the idea that there's some kind of potential for diplomacy here, then maybe they just go after Saudi Arabia and Jordan anyway, despite the nice things they're saying, because Saudi Arabia and Jordan have, of course, allowed their airspace to be used to attack Iran. That is kind of an interesting question. As far as the direct scenarios of what is going to happen, things are still very open. I'm about 60% at this point. Wow, Iran is just getting its butt kicked and is just going to continue getting its butt kicked, which is very surprising for me and is not what I was expecting. But there's still 40% of me that's like, well, the sun's going down in the Middle East right now. Tel Aviv could be in flames by 3 hours from now. There's still 40% of me that believes that or a smaller version of that is a real possibility. But that's not, right now, today anyway, it sure feels a lot like October of 2024 when Hezbollah got smacked really, really, really hard and everybody expected them to get up and they just didn't. But who knows? We're still very much in the fog of war. We do know that this did not have to happen. This is happening for Netanyahu. This is happening to cover up genocide. We know it's not about nukes. It is a regime change war that is not about to happen, that is not going to tit for tat. One of the more humiliating things, I didn't watch the speech myself, but I saw enough people characterizing it this way. Pezeshkian, the Iranian president, who was a moderate and was looking to negotiate, came out and said, "Oh, there's going to be a response at the time of our choosing," and that is not the moment, Iran. That is not the moment, Iran's government. The moment is you are at war with Israel and the United States. That's what's happening. The Trump administration is still, Marco Rubio came out and said, we had nothing to do with this. last night, Donald Trump has been spending all morning being like, of course, this was all us. We love it. This is totally our deal. We're so proud of this. We love it, everything about it. We told Iran this was coming, and it came. Ha, ha, ha. So, yeah, I don't know if Pezeshkian thought there was still some, when he made his speech, he thought there was still some daylight between Israel and the United States, but there clearly is not. So yeah, what's going to happen now? Is Iran defeated? Are we really about to plummet into sort of hell for the region? We'll see in the coming hours. Something else, something that's very standard, very important to point out here, is that Trump is obviously pro-war. This is. I supported Kamala Harris. It was hard for me to do so particularly vocally, but I did point out in a number of shorts, like Kamala Harris is not going to be great for Palestine, but she's going to be better. Kamala Harris is a possibility of a return to some kind of sanity and some kind of restraint of Israel. I, too, got kind of excited by Steve Witkoff, Trump's negotiator who forced Iran into a ceasefire in the first 2 months of this year. I thrilled when Trump backed off the war on Yemen and did a lot of talk about that. I really like the idea, and I was always saying it was the idea of lifting sanctions on Syria. I wouldn't be particularly surprised if this idea of lifting sanctions on Syria just sort of disappears in the coming weeks and months. Because I do think it was all BS all along. I do think that this was possibly executed by Trump, possibly executed by some other, Israel hawk in his cabinet or the Israeli government. I think this was an elaborate put-up job to lull Iran into a false sense of security. And I think Trump is still kind of like half-assedly still trying to do it, still trying to be like, sure, we'll negotiate with you as we murder all the people we were negotiating with. And if Iran falls for that at this point, they are children in the woods. But no, I think that's a very clear thing here. I've been a little sort of, curious over the past couple weeks, months about, oh wow, maybe Trump is distancing himself from Israel. Maybe this is like real progress. All that ended like that like sort of that fantasizing is over. Garbage. I was right all along. And yes, ran a video that said if Trump gets elected, I ran a video back in 2020 that if Trump gets reelected, we'll have war with Iran, and we absolutely have war with Iran. And that's the world we live in right now. But yeah, anybody who's still holding on to this idea that Trump is some kind of peacemaker is a moron. So yeah, that is something we know very much this morning. Interesting question here: is Saudi Arabia kind of a genius? Or is it Saudi foreign policy? You all know that I am not a big fan of Saudi Arabia. That is not generally what this channel is about, being positive about Saudi Arabia. But Saudi Arabia may have played its cards very well here. They may have actually learned something in 2019 when some amorphous collaboration between the Iranians and the Houthi government of Yemen took out some oil capacity in Saudi Arabia. They learned. They were like, wait a second, if this war that Washington, D.C. has been working so assiduously towards for well over 3 decades, 4 decades, honestly, I mean, since 1979, if this actually happens, we're the soft underbelly that gets absolutely destroyed. And so they worked very hard over the past 5 years to get closer to Iran, to have diplomatic relations with Iran. They're putting out the appropriate, oh gosh, this is terrible, messages this morning. Has Saudi Arabia really played its cards right? Managed to, Iran is still a historic rival. Is it going to be completely destroyed? And Saudi Arabia is going to just, this is so sad. and manage to reap the rewards of that with none of the costs? Maybe. Or, as I said earlier, Iran could look at their situation right now, realize they have to break something, and be desperate enough that they're not worried about, China's potential reaction. Because honestly, why would they be worried about China's potential reaction? China has no power in the region, and because it's China that depends on Middle East oil, as well as everybody other than the United States at this point. But it does appear as though Saudi Arabia may have pulled it off, may have achieved a bit of a victory here. But of course, it's only day one. We don't actually know what's going to happen here. What does this mean for Syria is something I've been thinking about. Trump made a big to-do about lifting Syria sanctions and sort of rubbing Netanyahu's nose in it. And is that still happening? I'm pretty dubious, frankly, but we'll see. Trump's what looked like a very savvy, intelligent bit of withdrawal against the Houthis a month or so back, essentially saying, wow, the U.S. Navy is just getting humiliated by the Houthis. Why don't we just not do that? Well, yeah, maybe that looks like it definitely was the right thing to not do that. But perhaps that now looks less like a savvy choice that really looks less like a savvy choice to just not do wars, and perhaps that means simply an agreement to do wars later. Let's focus on helping Israel do this big attack against Iran first, and now maybe we can, dial back and turn around once Iran has been crushed and deal with this Houthi problem. I don't think that will be anywhere near as easy as the Hezbollah, or it seems like, as of today, who knows what tomorrow will seem like. Seems like taking out the Iranian regime is proving to be rather easy as well. Because, and this is sort of an important detail that a lot of the more fevered expectations of U.S.-Iran war omit, is like, we're not sending a ground troop into any of this. I'm sure there's special forces on the ground helping Israel do whatever they did in and around Iran to prepare for these airstrikes. Sure, for sure. But we're not going to do large-scale ground forces into Iran, and we're certainly not going to do large-scale ground forces into Yemen. Basically, what we're doing right now is we are, and I think this is very much in the interests of the stupider people in Israel, is we're creating a situation where any kind of governing apparatus, official military forces in Iran or the region are destroyed. They can't exist anymore. There's not allowed to be any real sovereignty or resistance to U.S. and Israeli demands in the region. But what that facilitates is underground, sometimes literally underground, but asymmetrical sort of terrorist type forces, which is of course great, because that's exactly what Israel has correctly judged since 9/11, pushes the United States further into looking at the world the way Israel looks at it, and looking at every dead Muslim as a victory. And this is, of course, part of the box that Iran has been forced into at this point, which is that I think they really acknowledge that I think at this point, if Iran has the capacity, and might see this in the next couple hours, they will feel fully justified, and I can't think how anybody would dispute, they would feel fully justified in bombing the crap out of Israel. But they do know that if they take out U.S. soldiers, they're just driving Israel and the United States closer together in a context where the U.S. public is getting really sick of Israel. And a lot of even U.S. politicians in both parties are getting really sick of Israel. So Iran is like, well, geez, I don't know, we're getting destroyed now, but, can we afford to alienate Saudi Arabia? Can we afford to alienate, the U.S. public? It's just a really crappy situation for Iran. They have lost on pretty desperately. As I think regular viewers know, I have long maintained that most of this stuff, Iran, Russia, China, is all like fundamentally like bullshit. China, of course, being the exception. We have no military recourse against China if it wants to take Taiwan. Like, these are not things that I really believe in anymore. But with that one exception, the United States is just in charge everywhere and has plenty of other levers that, if it acted more intelligently, it could use and will use against China. Like, the United States is in charge. Great power competition. Iran, Russia, China is all just it's a joke. It's like a dumb fantasy. And this particular aspect of the fantasy seems to be, being revealed as such. It is, the axis of resistance was never a threat to the United States or Israel. The axis of resistance, much like the Soviet Union after World War II, what little purchase it managed to get, it got from really stupid U.S. decisions, like overthrowing Saddam Hussein, like funding all the jihadists to overthrow Assad that became the Islamic State. The only reason that that this threat existed on any level was because of U.S. missteps. And now we appear to be crushing it. Again, 24 hours from now, the picture could look different. There could be tons of dead U.S. soldiers. Tel Aviv could be on fire. But that does not look like the most likely result at this point. I think what we're seeing here is victory, is large-scale victory for Israel and the United States. This is, again, as with Russia's complete defeat, this is a stupid game for which we have won a stupid prize. This is militarized hegemony that is now very much boomeranging back to the United States. One of the many distractions that Israel and the United States, one of the many things that this is distracting people from in Israel and the United States is the fact that the U.S. Congress is currently arguing over a bill that will triple the funding. I've seen figures like $150 billion annually or $180 billion annually to not solve the border problem. I have a podcast coming out on this on Monday. The border problem in the United States is fundamentally a legal problem around the status and the makeup of the system. The incorrect way, the way to make the border problem worse, is to dump more money into the Department of Homeland Security to fully fund Donald Trump's Gestapo. I'm talking about CBP, I'm talking about Border Patrol, I'm talking about ICE. These forces are not being used to solve immigration problems. These forces that the U.S. Congress is about to give $180 billion to are here to militarize U.S. government and finally give the U.S. president something he's always wanted, or at least from FDR on down has wanted, which is a fully loyal military force for domestic terrorism, to do domestic terrorism. Because how else do you describe masked men running around throwing people into vans other than hijacking and domestic terrorism? So this like, oh, we beat Russia, we beat Iran, huzzah! Like, this garbage. We didn't have to beat Russia or Iran. Like, these places were eager to work with us and make money with us and be peaceful before we forced them into these roles. We force them into these roles and then we destroy them. And that is not... It's a stupid game we've won, but it's not a game that we want to play, and it does not redound to the long-term benefit of the United States of America or its people. It is a sad, stupid joke. The rules-based order is done. The United States is more firmly in power than it has ever been. And it is the United States government and the defense contractors that own it that have chosen to discard the rules-based order. The rules-based order is cheap. It is easy to run. It has been shockingly easy to run the world for the United States since the 1910s. The main thing standing in the way of the United States running the world since the 1910s has been the U.S. military-industrial complex. So, of course, we've decided that everything should be the U.S. military-industrial complex now. From our immigration policy to our foreign policy, it's all just crap. We have made a decision to move from the easy, cheap, peaceful running of the world to the United States empire of blood. I think it is a very satisfying fantasy for a lot of people on the left or the right, or that this is gonna just sort of backlash at the United States and it's all gonna fall apart real quick. And I think that's nonsense. I think that we can continue to crush the world under our boot heel for a very, very long time. I think the illusion of sovereignty for other countries is ending. The illusion of resistance or freedom or personal choice for other countries is ending. Welcome to the U.S. empire of blood. Have we got any questions? Will Iran respond meaningfully is the big question. Yeah, the answer is I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. That's what we'll see in the coming hours and days. That's the big question. I mean, but I do think we do know important things. We know that Trump is as anti-peace as you could possibly imagine. We do know that this was not a necessary thing. This was done for Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister that is the choice of Raytheon and McDonnell Douglas and Boeing and Northrop Grumman and all the other defense contractors. Yeah, any questions? And yes, as Logo points out, folks who put a little money on that question will have that provided. Will Trump get a third term, or will Ivanka replace him? I don't think Trump will get a third term. Honestly, if we give his Gestapo, ICE, and the Department of Homeland Security more broadly, $150 billion, I do think it's time to start asking questions about how the next election is going to go. But yeah, but no, I don't think it'll be Trump. Even Putin had to pretend to care about term limits. Do you remember Dmitry Medvedev or what have you, who was briefly like the Russian president because Putin had come to the end of his term back during the Obama years or something like that. So the idea of a Trump third term, no matter how much it may appeal to his decayed mind itself, there is still in the United States a lot more institutional history and respect for institutions than Russia in the 2000s. And if Putin in the 2000s couldn't bring himself to bust term limits, part of the reason Erdogan jumped from prime minister to president had something to do with term limits. I think perhaps by his party. So no, I don't think there's going to be a third Trump term. But if the U.S. Congress approves another $100 billion for a domestic Gestapo, then yeah, no, I think we should start asking questions about the next U.S. presidential election. Kamal Bereshid, I hope I pronounced that appropriately, did a super chat. Do you have a question, Kamal? I'll look out for that. Thank you for that, Kamal. I like that, D-Man. U.S. military-industrial complex is Walter White. I have watched, I don't know how many seasons are, but it's like 5 of 6 or 6 of 7 seasons of Breaking Bad. I have never watched the last season of Breaking Bad, but I somehow get the sense that it doesn't all work out for Walter White and his family. Call me crazy. But yeah, it's a real, of course, obviously, the U.S. empire will eventually fall. This is how history works, but I don't think it will be in any of our lifetimes, nor in our grandchildren's lifetimes. Hoffnung, question, what do you think Turkey is going to do? I personally think they will be the wild card. I have been wondering about that specifically a lot this morning, Hoffnung, because I think Turkey is very conscious that this is the next they're the next target. They're the next folks that that Turkey might want to go after. Because, sorry, they're the next folks. So Turkey are the next folks that Israel might want to go after. Sorry, I'm plugging in my TikTok phone here. So if I were Turkey right now, I'd be pretty worried. There are some worlds in which you can say like, oh well, maybe this works out for Turkey a little bit, like Iran being utterly debilitated or destroyed. But I don't really see it that way. I think anybody in the region has got to be pretty disturbed to be sharing it with Israel at this point. We see this with Egypt. Some folks in the U.S. military-industrial complex are like, "How dare you? How dare you? Egypt, how dare you remilitarize the Sinai?" Well, the Camp David Accords talk a lot about, or not about a lot, but there's an understanding that the folks in Gaza will not be abused, and that is Israel's doing a genocide, and Egypt is rightly terrified. And I think Turkey is less terrified, but I think has as a much more secure place than Egypt, a NATO member with a real economy. With a fairly flourishing military-industrial complex of its own, not one that could be probably turned off by the United States with a flip of a switch. Yeah, I think Egypt and Turkey should be terrified. And I don't think we're at a point where either Turkey or Egypt would consider joining in with Iran against Israel. They probably should, but I think it'll be. I mean, that would probably be the right choice, but I don't think that will happen. I think it's just going to continue being. I think the Middle East has probably got another century under the U.S. boot heel, with Israel as our bloodier and bloodier protectorate. Yeah, I think it flies under the radar a little bit here, but Hezbollah has largely been chastened and has not fired missiles back into Israel, but Israel is still constantly bombing Lebanon. Israel, after the fall of Assad, destroyed Syria's entire military and is now regularly issuing mandates to Syria about where they can and can't go in Syria. Is basically Israel has occupied the Golan Heights since the 1960s as a buffer zone. I think at least since the 90s or the 2000s, there was another buffer zone in Syrian territory between Israel and Syria. That buffer zone is now completely occupied by Israel, and Israel is moving into the suburbs of Damascus. They are just rolling into Syrian towns and killing protesters. So that's Lebanon, that's Syria. They are at war with and destroying large-scale infrastructure in Yemen, not on a daily basis, but on a weekly basis. I do not consider, I think a key part in hiding the genocide is imagining that Palestinians are at this point anything other than Israeli slaves, Israeli subjects. The Palestinians are not like a separate country that Israel is at war with, the way Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, and now Iran are. They are a subject population that Israel is exterminating. Israel is a rogue nation on an extraordinary scale. We have not seen a rogue nation on this scale. They've far surpassed Saddam Hussein's Iraq. We have not seen a rogue nation on this scale since the 1940s in Europe. And the United States is going to continue to endorse this. And I think continue to push them further. So, yeah, I think Turkey or Egypt could be to some extent like, oh, wow, like, yeah, I guess our Persian rival's out of the way. But I think they're should be a lot more worried about, wait a second, we've got Israel, this state that is based on war, that relies on war to murder its subjects, and Iran looks like it's collapsing. I think that's more scary to Turkey and Egypt than it is an opportunity. So, yeah, there's that. How does this help Americans? It doesn't. As I said, like it makes our empire of rules into an empire of blood. It makes it harder to manage and more costly to manage. It is. I think that the United States has the resources and the wherewithal to keep this going for decades or a century or two. But it is the stage beyond, like, you look at this in Rome. You look at this with the British. You look at this famously. There's a Greek author called Thucydides, who wrote about the war between Athens and Sparta. And it's one of the classics of Western literature, and it basically lays out what's happening here. Athens leads a coalition. Everybody loves them. They're helpful. They inspire great heights of Greek culture. And then they get angry and belligerent and turn their alliance into a empire that does less and less for all of its subjects, get more and more belligerent and violent, continue to pick fights, continue to crush things, and then eventually collapse when they finally reach the worst of their decisions. So yeah, what a joy to be in our lifetimes. We get to watch that transition of republic to empire that we saw with Rome. We get to experience that transition from a United States that, of course, the United States always commit crimes. All governments always commit crimes. But what we are absolutely seeing in Israel, in Ukraine, in Taiwan. Ukraine is obviously different. Russia bad. Yada yada. But we are absolutely watching this metamorphosis from a country that was on net very, very, very good for the world to one that is just a violent menace. We are the revisionist power. We are the authoritarian menace. We are the nightmare, and you all live here with us. So yeah. Sorry if it doesn't seem very positive, but I don't have a lot of positive things to say today. So yeah. Question: do you think Turkey could convince the EU to side with them against the U.S. and Israel? No. And do you think it would even matter? Also no. You make it sound like this is just a quick over with, but won't this be worse than the Iraq War? So the idea that this would be worse than the Iraq War kind of depends on putting U.S. troops on the ground, and we won't. I think Iran certainly still has the capacity to kill the tens of thousands of troops we have on the ground, maybe 10,000 troops and civilian personnel we have in our various bases, but Iran's too scared to at this point. I think a lot of the prognoses of this is going to be our next $1 trillion war that relies on, frankly, Iran being stronger than it is. So we're never going to attempt what we attempted to do in Iraq. There will be no U.S. boots on the ground in Iran. Why would we? The limits of air power have been demonstrated against the Houthis, who are quite comfortable and long experienced in running a war from caves. The Iranian government believes it's a government, and wants to have a military force and wants to have and we're just making it clear that you're not allowed to have those sorts of things anymore. Middle East first. I think we'll see actually elements of this in Europe. It's interesting. I think it's going to be an interesting clash as Europe starts arming up more and more, and the United States gets more and more belligerent about, yeah. Of course, I'm glad you're doing 3% of your GDP, but we meant 3% of your GDP for U.S. weapons. None of this try to build your own military-industrial complex. We've got all these beautiful Palantir and Anduril and Boeing products that we'd rather you had. Will the UK give up Chagos after today? I'm not entirely certain who Chagos is, but you've done a super chat, so I'm going to Google it. What is Chagos? Chagos are... no. No. The United Kingdom, despite this much ballyhooed, everybody was getting very excited about, France. And I almost kind of wonder, it's like, was France and the UK in on this? You guys may have noticed there was, France was putting together a conference with Saudi Arabia to recognize Palestine. And oh, gee whiz, that's been canceled. And France has come out to say how excited they are about Israel's attack on Iran. Of course, they're not saying that explicitly, but there's no condemnation here. The Germans actually came out and said that they condemned Iran's indiscriminate attack against Israel, which is pretty crazy. But this actually could just be Europe recognizing what the United States is becoming. Europe recognizing that if they step out of line, they'll get killed. So yeah, no, of course. I mean, the UK gave up Chagos a long time ago. I believe Chagos is the island archipelago that is Diego Garcia, that the United States uses Diego Garcia. As we transition from the Empire of Rules to the Empire of Blood, I expect a lot less thought and time given to consideration for the indigenous of the Maldives. It's the Maldives, right? The Chagos is like part of the Maldives or what have you. So no, I would not expect the UK to do anything to threaten this United States at this point. Diego Garcia being the U.S. base in the middle of the Indian Ocean that will be there for until, I don't know, until somebody obliterates it. If Iran did conduct massive strikes against the Gulf states, how would those countries be able to weather a collapse of practically their entire economy? How much political turmoil would it produce? I don't think the Gulf states are very good at weathering any, and you can see how quickly they folded with the Houthis. In 2019, there was that strike against Saudi Arabia that got Saudi Arabia negotiating. The Houthis looked like they were going to really complete their takeover of Yemen, basically taking Yemen's oil resources and wiping out the last Saudi position there in 2021, 2022. Interesting, the Houthis did end up backing down and not taking that, but the Saudis and the UAE started bombing Yemen again in 2022, and Yemen just 2 missile attacks, one on the UAE, one on, I think, like a Jeddah while an F1 race was happening. And they were like, oh, no, we're good. Like the Saudi and Gulf model is based on very, permanently placed, non-mobile petroleum infrastructure, which is very vulnerable. And the UAE, Dubai specifically, more than Abu Dhabi, and Saudi Arabia really wants to get here, are tremendously dependent on the idea that it is a peaceful place where expat business people can come, not pay taxes, benefit from slave labor, party and do sex industry stuff, and you can't do that with missiles raining down on it. So yeah, if Iran decided to do massive attack against the Gulf, I think the Gulf would fold. I mean, very quickly. I think that would be. If Iran is like, well, we're going out, we should take the rest of the region with us in chaos, and make the world suffer with $150 oil. That's their play. There won't be any U.S. troops on the ground to stop that. So, Iran is a bigger country. Iran is a mountainous country. If the United States were to attempt what we did in Iraq or Afghanistan, it would be absolutely impossible. We're not going to do that. We can just destroy Iran's leadership capacity, as we have mostly done over the past 24 hours. We can just do that. Mostly destroy Iran's leadership capacity, as we have over the past 24 hours, and the only lash out response that Iran has is, yes, kill a few thousand U.S. soldiers in Middle East bases, but also make the whole world suffer with $150 a barrel oil, $200 a barrel oil. That also actually makes the United States and Canada and Mexico much, much richer. So yeah, it's the U.S.'s world, and we've decided to start being really, really vicious with it. So Um, all right. Questions. Do we have questions? I don't feel the need to do the full 2 hours for this one. It's sort of an emergency thing. But if there are no more questions, I can stop. But I'm happy to keep answering questions, as I've got 170 people here on YouTube and 50 odd on TikTok. So do we have more questions? Do you still predict the Saudi government would fail? Absolutely. However, no, actually, no. That is a good point, Abraham Mohammed. If a lot depends on how this all goes. If Iran's production is taken offline, Israel is promising a weeks-long continuous bombing of Iran that is ongoing. I haven't looked at the news. There's been so much for Israel to bomb that they haven't made it to Iran's petroleum infrastructure yet. Perhaps they are intentionally not going for Iran's petroleum infrastructure because, I don't know, maybe Trump doesn't actually want oil prices to be $200 a barrel yet. But if Iran does get to the petroleum infrastructure of Iran, that's what maybe I think they're managing to smuggle to China like 1.5 or 2 million barrels. Is that a day or whatever? Can't remember. But what the measurement is, instantly taking that off would create a mild spike. If Iran reacts to Israeli destruction of its petroleum infrastructure by saying, well, shit, nobody can have petroleum infrastructure in the Persian Gulf, then yeah, no, I mean, oil prices would go absolutely nuts. But that's sort of like a big catch-22 for Saudi Arabia, right? Oil prices go absolutely nuts, but their infrastructure is gone. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. Oil prices have certainly spiked over the past 24 hours, unsurprisingly. They went from the 60s into the 70s, which is still historically low. But what is the end result, asked Edward T. Morris? How can Iran save face with its people? That's the question. It's hard to see how. And they are very much backed into a corner, and that is kind of a terrifying place for them to be. Iran, in contrary to Hezbollah, is a state. Can they play the long game with Israel? Well, what's the long game with Israel? That's the thing. What the Houthis can do in Yemen is they can stop shipping in the Red Sea, and it's kind of nice. Because it doesn't really impose dramatic, horrible costs on anybody other than Egypt. But it's annoying. It's really annoying, and it annoys everybody. And it's something like that. Iran's it still has this big oil weapon that they can produce. It's all very accessible, non-mobile infrastructure, petroleum infrastructure around the Persian Gulf. They can destroy that. But the problem for them is that it is so big. The taking out 30% of oil and gas would lead to large scale starvation in the world, and also make the United States vastly richer. That's the problem for Iran right now. Their other lever to pull would be, some kind of insurgency against U.S. troops that are never coming. That's the thing. So yeah, it's Iran is in a box, and if I were them, I'd probably be considering just destroying Saudi Arabia anyway. But yeah. Edward Morris, my brother, how would Iran save face with its people, the Iranian regime? I don't know. I do know that a lot of Iranians who hate the regime hate Israel a lot more, certainly now, and are very willing to do, to suffer to make Israel suffer. But it's unclear at this point. Could be becoming clearer off of this podcast, but it's not clear at this point that Iran really has the capacity. So all we thought about the U.S. military was wrong? No. I think that the U.S. military is very much not fit for purpose. I think it's pretty ridiculous that we're using U.S. naval forces as sort of like mobile platforms for air defense. Like, none of this is done efficiently. None of this, it seems like one of the main roles for the U.S. Navy at this point is they're all sort of like clustering in around Israel to put Israeli territory through under the missile envelopes of these ships. But it's not like they were not. I don't think it was like a put up job that the U.S. Navy was pretty useless against the Yemeni military. I think that was pretty clear. And again, it's not really like true. I mean, Israel was using like F-35s or whatnot, but they're using F-35. Actually, there was some reports that there might have been Israeli planes over Iranian air defense. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. But I still have very little respect for U.S. military equipment. Ari, if Iran wanted nukes, I think they can get them and no one can stop them, but they become isolated. Yeah, I think there's a distinct chance that Netanyahu has now guaranteed an Iranian nuclear bomb. I think there's a lot of unclear thinking that you've penetrated right through on Twitter. It's like, oh, well, now they're going to get a bomb, and that's going to save them. And I'm not entirely certain that getting a bomb would save them. Like, the degree to which Israel has sort of attained air superiority over Iran at this point. It's like, okay, so if they come up with a bomb, like they're just going to sort of detonate it in some desert in Iran and be like, look, we got a bomb. And we're like, Israel's like, great. Like, we'll target every resource that has been around that area for, it's, yeah, I don't know. Azar Bistoon says, will you invest in Raytheon now? I will not. I do have like sort of the level of principles to not put money into defense companies. However, I have a lot of money in big tech companies, and they are all defense contractors now too. So I'm not that principled. I am principled enough to not put my money into sole source, death machine, destroy the American Republic companies like Raytheon. Interestingly, Raytheon's brand is so bad that they're no longer Raytheon. They changed their name. Raytheon, I think, changed to RTX Technologies a long time ago. But Raytheon, it's such a good like shorthand for military industrial complex, just such a good evil sounding name. But yeah, Raytheon no longer exists. I mean, there are smaller subsidiaries that may still have the Raytheon branding, but Raytheon has changed to RTX Technologies because even Raytheon knew that Raytheon just sounds evil and destructive. Will Iran make a nuclear weapon? That's a really important question. I think it's much more likely now. After Iran, what are the chances Israel attacks Qatar next? None at this point. I think that's largely drama. I think Israel acknowledges that the Gulf countries are now pretty much their playthings as they are the U.S.'s playthings. There is still, I believe, the U.S.'s largest base in the region is in Qatar, and that is that's still, Israel doesn't have many boundaries, but not bombing countries where the United States has a large military presence is one of those. Joined a bit late. Is U.S. involvement confirmed? Absolutely. Donald Trump has spent the entire morning confirming U.S. involvement. I guess you could claim that Trump's just sort of after the fact trying to claim responsibility, but I think it's quite clear just from the level of resources used or what have you. And Rubio looks like a bit of a dunce, as he often does, because he came out last night to say, like, the United States had nothing to do with this. And Trump has spent the entire morning saying the United States had everything to do with this. So, yeah. If sanctions in Syria are not removed, can Jelani join the axis of resistance in this context of tension? Not really. Because Jelani is entirely dependent on the Gulf, which is just a U.S. satrapy. Gulf monarchies entirely dependent on the United States. Jelani entirely dependent on the Gulf monarchies, and also like the United States, like and Turkey, of course. But the Turkey's also pretty dependent on the United States. People like really don't pay a lot of attention to the role of USAID in keeping the Idlib pocket like fed, or I don't know if it's USAID specifically, if there were a couple layers of contractors between them, but yeah, I mean, Turkey kept Jelani armed for a decade in Idlib, and we kept him fed there. So yeah, Iran cannot bow down explicitly, but yeah, it's like, and Hezbollah never bowed down explicitly. But I think, as I was reluctant to say at the time, like Hezbollah was beaten. And I mean, Hezbollah did successfully deter Israeli ground forces from going further into Lebanon, but big whoop. Yeah. Rami says Iran is much weaker than I thought. I mean, 24 hours from now, 2 hours from now, Rami, that picture could look very different. But I think Iran is much weaker than I thought seems to be the consensus among intelligent people now. And I think that consensus is growing. So, yeah. Will this be a political win for Trump? We'll see. I think there's a lot of people who feel pretty stupid. I think Tucker Carlson's got some egg on his face. I think a lot of people in his movement who look pretty stupid right now. But maybe in a month's time, those people will look vindicated if Iran blows up a U.S. military base or something along those lines. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people who do legitimately believe. I think that Trump had some kind of pro-peace orientation, and that has been proven to be complete nonsense. So yeah. When do you think the U.S. public will snap with these wars? I don't think we will. And I think that I do wonder, like, if what I'm doing has like a time limit on it. Like, if I'm like, I used to joke about like, oh yeah, I'll keep doing my YouTube channel until the U.S. government drone strikes me. But like I don't know. Like I don't know. Like I kind of wonder if maybe not the Trump administration, but the next administration, Republican or Democrat, I'm not gonna get a drone strike, but I'll get a knock on my door. It says, "Hey Rob, why don't you knock this off?" And I'm a pretty cowardly person. I'm not physically brave. I'd probably knock this off. So yeah, I think it's pretty sad and Orwellian, but I'm a white guy who's pretty bought into the system as it exists. So at a certain point, I'll get cowardly and stop talking, and so will everyone else in the United States, which is definitely already happening. I don't know. Maybe that's too negative. Maybe there's some big change coming, but because places emerge from authoritarian systems, but I think we've got a lot further to descend into one before then. Oh, thank you, Zacharias. She pointed out I missed a super chat question. What will happen with the EU? What will happen with the EU? I mean, I think the EU has demonstrated today, or at least I guess Britain's no longer in the EU, of course, but Germany and France have demonstrated that they are rolling over and getting on board with beating up Iran. So I think that it's an interesting set of calculations, because Europe, like China, really doesn't want the Persian Gulf stuff to be disrupted. So perhaps they're making the calculus that actually it's better to further isolate Iran and make it clear to Iran that they have no plausible way out. I don't know if that's the right calculus. But yeah, the EU, the biggest risk for the EU at this point is Iran just saying screw it and taking out Saudi Arabia, or specifically taking out Saudi or Kuwaiti or Iraqi oil and gas production. So, yeah. Egypt, not Turkey, is next, Rob. Elmodo points out that Egypt, not Turkey, is next. Very good point. Very good point. So will the Iranian regime even be able to survive this? It's a great question. I know a lot of people in Iran hate them. I know that they have utterly failed in the region and have utterly failed to resist Israel at this point. But, it's still also an authoritarian regime with a lot of levers to pull to stay in control. So I don't know. It is kind of interesting. I don't know if this is just the drones haven't gotten there yet, but it is interesting that the popularly elected president, Israel has allowed him to survive thus far. Israel has allowed the supreme leaders to survive thus far. This is perhaps some vestige of sanity. Perhaps someone in the U.S. State Department says, "Well, Jesus, you can kill the generals, but don't kill the elected civilian leadership of the country just yet." So yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's scope for Pezeshkian to make some different choices. I think if the United States were interested in peace, we would be working really hard to give Pezeshkian an out. There's actually I think we're probably at a moment, much like the moment when Iran came to the United States with open arms after we crushed Saddam Hussein, we're probably at a moment where there's scope to work with Pezeshkian to give the supreme leader a dignified retirement and talk about a new constitutional convention for Iran and a new regime and this, that, and the other thing. That is not what Israel and the United States want. The Israel and the United States want death and destruction and exploding things. So as has been demonstrated for 2 years, almost 2 years in Gaza. I think we're now at a point where, especially if Iran can't get it together to shoot any missiles off at Israel tonight, and this could be part of Iran's calculus, Israel's going to be like, wait a second, we kind of look like assholes here, I don't know that Israel actually wants Iran to fall at this point. They kind of want a little bit more of a fight because the whole, premise of Israel's genocide is based on how threatened they are and how they constantly need to do stuff like this. And that is so yeah, I mean, are we going to start seeing Israel and the United States taking actions to shore up the Iranian regime? Obviously not like open and obvious ones, but that's kind of, if you see some inexplicable looking decisions in the coming weeks, that may actually be the rationale. Is it that Iran is much weaker than we thought? Absolutely. More that we didn't expect the U.S. to go far in backing up Israel. I think, and I think I fell into this as well. I think it was very foolish of us to place any hope in Donald Trump that the U.S. wouldn't go this far in backing up Israel. Donald Trump is exactly the disgusting, abject slave of U.S. military companies that Genocide Joe was. So, yeah, the Greater Israel Project coming to fruition. Yeah, it's not going to work out well for Israel in the long term, but okay. But it works out great for U.S. defense companies and the growing authoritarian empire of blood that the United States is becoming. So, huzzah. Greetings from Israel. Many people are already talking about this in Tel Aviv. Iran already retaliated, but many of their drones were intercepted. Yeah, it is kind of interesting that, and again, Yair, what time is it in Israel? I mean, who knows what this night will bring, but I think there's a growing consensus that Iran, in fact, has no capacity, to hit Israel. Or perhaps are judging that, what little capacity we have is so meager that we need to save it for, the U.S. troops trying to storm the beaches, which I don't expect to happen. But I don't know. But yeah, it seems like you send those drones to sop up a raft of missiles, sop up air defense. So the missiles can come in. And it seems like Iran sent out a bunch of those drones that sopped up some air defense, and the missiles never came. I've also seen, this is Twitter, so who knows. But I've seen some suggestions that, perhaps a lot of the Iranian missile stockpiles survive, Israel simply bombed the doors. So they are currently attempting to dig out the doors to their stockpiles while Israel is continuing to bomb those doors. So a rather Sisyphean and grim task. Iran's problem is that it has too much pride. So, Code Red asked, "What WTF are we talking about? This is insane." Well, yes, that is. I've been here for a while, Code Red, more or less since October, November of 2023. Welcome. It may be a naive question, but I ask anyway. What are the odds of a conventional total war between Israel and Iran, with infantry and all, like the war between Iran and Iraq War in the '90s? Pretty slim. I guess Iran's going to march across Saudi Arabia and Jordan to get there. It seems pretty unlikely. I think Israel's planning is to use Azerbaijan to try and create some kind of uprising in Iran. That seems still, I think, probably sort of a distant possibility, but a lot more likely. But yeah, like conventional Iran-Iraq war between Iran and Israel, I'd say the chances of that are about zero. It's 8 p.m. So night is falling in Tel Aviv, and we shall see what the night brings. But I think the consensus is that Iran may not have much to shoot. The Supreme Leader is saying a speech. Interesting. Is he saying anything interesting? Yeah, I haven't looked at. This is the longest period. Well, no, I did manage to sleep last night for 3 or 4 hours, but this would be the longest period of time since I've been conscious since 10 o'clock last night that I have been off the Twitter. So let's see. And the blue sky is very useful as well. But what has the world revealed? Tell me, Twitter. Have we? I think I'm losing a bit of steam. Have we got more questions? Iranian air defenses operating in Tehran. Oh, good for them. All right, I need to keep talking, or people are going to lose interest, and I can't have that. The Supreme Leader saying a speech. Who even comes close to the U.S.? Nobody. No, I mean, this is what I've been saying. Like, the United States has run the world since 1917, and it is a succession of idiotic choices by aggressive morons that has kept the world from being a U.S.-run utopia. The Cold War was over in the 1950s, and then we extended it with Vietnam. The war on terror is a complete waste of time that really just made the world worse and made China and Russia scared enough to fall into our great power competition plan. It's all nonsense. And I think if Iran proves to be as weak as most people are now expecting, this just really underlines my points. Why was Iran so stupid to be drawn into this false sense of complacency? Because it's a little flattering. I talk about this a lot. Oh, the false sense of complacency. I think Iran kind of needed a false sense of complacency. I was reluctant to believe it, but it now seems that the Israeli attacks in, April and October of last year perhaps took out more of their capacities than we had thought. They had fewer of those capacities for the kinds of stupid conflicts against, the Islamic State. Iran really proved itself to the region and took a lot more power in the region by defeating the Islamic State. But the Islamic State was a joke. It was a bunch of foreign fighters in pursuit of an idiotic ideology, mostly funded by the CIA. And the CIA stopped the funding in 2017, and Iran, in cooperation with the United States and the Kurds in Syria and Assad in Syria and the Iraqi government, managed to destroy the Islamic State, which was a CIA program, once the CIA program was removed. So a lot of the rumored prowess of the Iranian military came down to defeating the Islamic State, which wasn't really much of a threat. Defeating Iraq, Saddam Hussein, which is like, I mean, the guy was a clown. So yeah. But it's interesting, and I think about this a lot. Is just, and we're certainly have done some shorts about it recently. The way that the propaganda of our adversaries, and like Russia and China and Iran, is the same propaganda of the Pentagon that wants to make us afraid of our adversaries. Russia finds it flattering to hear that they have all these capacities and these powers. And you had Wagner. I know people dispute this on the Discord server, and I've got a podcast coming out in a week and a half that might seem silly to people on my Discord server, which I hate, because I have a lot of smart people on my patrons-only Discord server. You should sign up on Patreon to join our Discord server. A lot of smart people saying smart things. But I still contend that Russia has sort of, the Russia Wagner forces have left Mali in some disgrace, having failed to meet any of their objectives. And then the Russians are like, no, our influence in Africa is only growing. And the BBC and the US government is like, no, don't you see? The Russians are right. Their influence in Africa is only growing. And that's sort of what this thing is. Like, why were the Iranians, so believing these stories of their own prowess and danger and so eager? Because of pride, because of national pride. People like to believe they are from a powerful country and that they have agency. And it's becoming pretty clear that the Iranians never had that. So Edward T. Morris says, unpopular opinion. Can you make the argument the world is a U.S.-run utopia? How many people are killed in conflicts per year compared to population versus the 200 years leading to 1945? No, I agree. I agree with that entirely. But now it's falling apart because the United States has decided. I agree entirely that the first 30 years after World War II were extraordinary. First 50 years or what have you. But now if you look around the world, most of the wars were started by the United States or had very heavy participation from the United States. I got very excited a couple of years back to cover the war in Ethiopia because I was like, actually, this war in Ethiopia has very little to do with the United States, and it was a huge novelty. So, yeah. But yeah. I have a question how this damages Israel in the long term. I mean, eventually, and maybe this is just a romantic on my part, vision on my part, eventually, the people in the Arab world will attain a degree of development, a degree of democracy, a degree of self-sufficiency. And when they do that, they will look back at this century, or most likely centuries, of horrific repression and genocide and disgusting Hitler-like behavior, frankly, from Israel, and we'll crush it, or just nuke it. Certainly what we're doing to Iran, whether or not it prompts Iran to get a nuclear weapon, it is definitely prompting a lot of people. I'm not sure it's actually the accurate lesson, but we're seeing it a lot over the past 24 hours. Everybody's looking at Iran and being like, North Korea is pretty happy right now. North Korea loves being nuclear. North Korea feels pretty safe and happy, and Iran is getting fucked. Everybody should get a nuke. Everybody should get a nuke. Everybody should get a nuke. And I totally believe that is partially astroturfed by the defense industry executive that owns Twitter. But, I think there's also people legitimately believe that. Absolutely what we've done here, where we lure Iran into a succession of lengthy, complicated discussions about keeping them from having a nuclear weapon, and we get them to sign a humiliating agreement, and then we rip it up, and then we start the process again and say, no, this time we're serious, and then we launch an premeditated, like launch an unprovoked attack, yeah, that's pretty much the end of nuclear non-proliferation. And I think that's an important, whether or not Iran decides to get a bomb, almost everybody else in the world is going to look at this and decide to get a bomb as like their only line of defense against the U.S. empire of blood. Yeah, so we're going to get massive proliferation. And even if it's only the folks that the military-industrial complex wants, it's only Poland and South Korea, 20 years from now, 40 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, we'll get like a AQCon network that one of the dozens of nuclear countries will get destabilized and a bomb will go out the door. And if Israel continues to be this hate state about murdering Arabs and genocide and destroying all Arab governments and maintaining the entire Arab world in a state of peonage under disgusting Gulf monarchs and whatnot, someone will just nuke Israel. That's the world that that's Netanyahu's legacy. So, yeah. Do you think the rise in oil prices will benefit Russia? If Iran takes out Gulf oil, Russian oil will look... Absolutely. No, yeah, this is great for Russia. This is phenomenal for Russia. But, it's also phenomenal for defense contractors because it means that Russia's eventual collapse, lasts another couple of years, maybe another decade. So that's great for everything comes up. Everything comes up Raytheon. So well, if I don't want to get kicked off of YouTube, so I shouldn't say that explicitly too many times. But if people in Israel don't want me to compare it to Germany in the 1940s, Israel should stop acting like Israel in the 1940s. Are you a communist? No, I'm not a communist. I am perhaps too much of a beneficiary of the capitalist system to continue talking about the way the world works to the extent that I do. Crow Guy, if the Iranian people were to do an uprising, it would not happen under Israeli strikes, but it may happen a week or two after the dust settles. Is Israel going to let the dust settle? Is a pretty interesting question. Will NATO end after Russia war is done? Of course not. NATO will probably last as long as U.S. empire does. Nobody can make more sense of things more than you can. Thanks. Well, that's very kind. Sorry it's so bleak. I know it's a bit of a downer, but it's a bit of a down day. It's been a bit of a down 20 months. Well, I've been doing this for 90 minutes, and I wasn't actually planning to do this today. Anyway, thank you all for showing up and helping helping me process what's going on. I wish peace and prosperity for the people of Israel and Iran and everywhere else. I wish incarceration for the leaders of Israel and Iran and the United States. But other than that, hopefully we'll have a more peaceful and safer world one day. But that's not what I see as likely to happen in the short term. What will happen with the Ukraine-Russia war? I think it's likely to continue going for significantly longer. If somebody wants to do super chat, maybe I'd hang out a little bit longer. But I think I'm probably at the end here. I saw that Hegseth, I hadn't confirmed this, but someone in the chat says that Hegseth says that Ukraine will get no new aid from the United States. I mean, I don't know, really. What do you think? We'll see. Adam Jaber, you've done it. You've prolonged it. Yes, the U.S. Empire of Blood, and that is a phrase that occurred to me this morning while outlining this, and I feel like it may be a phrase we continue to hear. Yeah. Well, I've got to keep talking, so somebody's got to have a question. Let's see here. So people want to talk about Russia and Ukraine. I think that people got really, really scared 3 or 4 months ago. They're like, oh, U.S. is about to abandon Ukraine, what have you. Yet we've seen a ton of communication from Trump recently about how betrayed he feels by Putin, and how impressed he is by Ukrainian attacks, and this guy. I mean, it's Trump, so who's to say what's going to happen long term? What can be relied upon? But I think it's pretty gosh darn clear over the past 24 hours that Trump is a plaything of the U.S. defense interests, and this is a pretty. Herner Verzog asks, how close is Netanyahu to losing his government? Not very close at all. I'd say further away than he's been in a while. This is basically a Twitter exchange I saw on Matthew Petty's page or whatever earlier today. But it's it is when it looks like Israel is not meeting its aims, or that it's just a tide of blood and destruction without much benefit. At that point, everybody remembers how much they hate Netanyahu and that they've been trying to get rid of him for years. When he has, as he had in October of 2024 with the sort of destruction of Hezbollah, as he had in October of 2023, and as he's had right now, a tangible big victory to point to, he becomes bulletproof again. So Netanyahu, 48 hours ago, looked incredibly fragile and very close to falling. Now he looks like, he looks like a war winner. So, here's to know. Primal Fuckhead says, thanks, Rob. Here's to know World War III. Yes, thank you. James Parker says, the Trump administration has already mostly pulled the plug on Ukraine. There hasn't been any new package passed since he took office, and some ones that have already passed have been redirected. I think Europe is more than capable of holding up that end, and frankly, I think if they're serious about it, they'd probably be a lot better than the United States at keeping Ukraine going. I'm not too worried, and I do tend to believe that, as is certainly the case with the actively genocidal U.S. client Israel, it was apparently quite easy to convince the Trump administration to continue making money off of Israel-sponsored destruction. I think that Ukraine is a good deal more sympathetic. Sure, Trump and Vance have said a lot of stuff, but they said a lot of stuff about Israel and peace in the Middle East too. So I think that if Ukraine were in real danger, if they could be prevailed upon to give a lot more money to U.S. defense contractors to save Ukraine. Will Egypt get one? I think if Egypt got one, I think any Egyptian government. So Egypt is still shot through with Israeli intelligence assets, no question in my mind. And I think that were there any real movement in that direction from the current Egyptian government, I think that Israel would crush that government, kill that leader, as would the United States. But over time, is Israel still a satellite state for the United States? Of course. Yeah. And that's an important thing to realize. Like, Netanyahu is like an after effect of U.S. politics. Like, Israel is Netanyahu, of course, was prime minister in the 90s as well, but he was briefly prime minister and freaked a lot of people out. The durability of Netanyahu, and I guess Sharon was during this period, and Olmert, who is now, of course, speaking out against Netanyahu, though probably a lot more quietly today. The reason that Israel has had right-wing, violent, aggressive governments for the past 20 years is because of 9/11 and the United States transition towards incredibly violent, aggressive governments. The extent to which Israeli politics is independent from the U.S. choices, specifically U.S. defense industry choices, is dramatically overstated. We saw, in fact, Huckabee, the Trump administration's ludicrous representative in Israel. We saw him actively working to shore up Netanyahu's coalition. So yeah, Netanyahu is absolutely a pathology of the Israeli public, but people don't. It's more complex than that. And U.S. agency and U.S. power and U.S. influence, even in situations where it looks like, oh, we're just transparently doing what the Israeli Likud party wants. Da, 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 da. If you look into it a little more deeply, we're also doing what U.S. defense interests want. And the Likud parties and its related parties' successes over the past 20 years are 100% a 9/11 thing. Zachariah Seed kind of wasted the super chat. Yeah. Well, I came up with something to say. Yeah, I don't know what 14 Tsar are, but I'm grateful for them regardless. We strongly condemn the indiscriminate Iranian attack on Israeli yeah, geez, the German Foreign Office has really humiliated itself. Everybody was getting very excited because I think the German Chancellor, prefacing it with, it's very hard for a German Chancellor to say something like this, but says, I think perhaps that maybe Israel has killed too many children in Gaza. And we were very excited about that earlier this week or last week or what have you. And then the German Foreign Office, after Israel's sweeping regime decapitation attack on Iran, put out a press release saying, we condemn the indiscriminate Iranian attacks on Israel. Was that the Iranian generals using their bodies to attack Israeli missiles that came through their windows? How dare those Iranian generals use their bodies and their children and their wives to attack defenseless Israeli missiles shooting through windows in Tehran? It's good for the Germans to condemn that nastiness. Logico Extreme asks, what are Huckabee's chances at the presidency after his Ozempic-powered weight loss and Trump adoration? I don't think there's much chance at the presidency for many of these Republican Party yahoos. I don't think, I think hopefully after Trump, I gotta fucking pray that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are going to put up a couple people under 50. I think a Buttigieg Vance 2028 is a real possibility, or an Ossoff Vance, or I don't know if there's other. Oh Jesus, I guess DeSantis is still pretty young, but I think he's probably pretty discredited. Thank you for the chef's kiss accent. Usually I'm not so good at the German accent, but I guess I'm angry and sad, and maybe I'm better at accents in that context. Netanyahu isn't going anywhere until late 2026. If his coalition didn't ditch him after October 7th, they aren't going to ditch him now. I tend to agree. Germans are, Zachariah Seed says, Germans are always on the wrong side of history, no matter what era. Is Trump going to get slaughtered in the midterms? I still expect as much. But who knows? Let's see. France is always on the right side of history. Name biggest. Okay. Germany needs to sit down and shut up. Sick of them, says Sarah Jessica Farter. All right. Well, that's an interesting approach. Questions. Vance clears 28. Newsom. I don't know. I mean, Newsom sort of rolling over for a while with the Trump's Gestapo's invasion of California, but lately he's been showing a little teeth. Who knows? Hard to say. There's a lot of time between here and there, and a lot of nasty stuff that's gonna happen. Germany needs to stop feeling guilty. France also supports Israel. That was kind of surprising. Macron was apparently all shaping up to recognize Palestine in the coming weeks in a conference in New York. And that conference, I believe, has been canceled. So, who knows? Isn't it amazing that everything we witness today in the world harkens back to Blaise Pascal's all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly? It's like shit always has to happen. I think that's probably true. We should all adopt more meditative practices. Maybe that's what I should do after this. Meditate with a big cigar. Yeah. I think I'm running out of gas, guys. Sorry for a rather depressing presentation here. I'm gonna go to the Met and maybe do some drawing down at the museum, or I think I'm just gonna maybe. Well, of course I'm gonna spend like a half hour check-in, but I think I'm gonna maybe tune out for a bit, and hope peace and prosperity comes to the Middle East. James Parker. Germany says, I strongly condemn the Iranian missiles that missed. It's about the size of it. All right. Thanks so much. Yeah, stay safe out there. Especially in Israel and Iran. All right. Israel fighter jets got hit by. Oh, I like that. All right. Maybe a super chat would change my mind. I think it's time for bed, folks. Thank you, though.